We're joined this morning by Caddo Parish Coroner Dr. Todd Thoma. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Hey, Aaron, glad to be here. Thanks.
Dan Keel is with me this morning. Robert's on vacay, so that's the other voice you will hear this morning.
How you doing, Dan?
Good.
Got to ask you, we had the tragedy in Bossier City, the death of the twin 3-year-olds. Heat-related deaths is what it looks like. First off, tell us, the dangers of leaving children in a vehicle. I know you want to get that message out.
Well, it's not just children, pets, anybody left in a vehicle. This time of year, especially this time of year, temperatures inside of the cars can get to be extremely hot very quickly. If you look at the studies, when temperature gets up to around 90 degrees, the temperature inside of the car can go from 90 up to about 150 to 160 within 10 to 15 minutes. When the temperature gets that high, there's no compensatory mechanism that can fix that problem. It's very rare that anybody would ever intentionally leave a child. The key is that when a child gets into a car, you have to have a high index of suspicion. Kids do things you don't expect to do. They get in trunks of cars, they get in empty refrigerators, they get into cars if they're not watched. I mean, you have to have a high index of suspicion in situations like that.
What happens physically to a person when you're overwhelmed by heat?
It's a terrible thing. I mean, if you stop and think about this, if you're in an enclosed vehicle like that and the temperature gets up to 150 degrees, your body temperature is around 98 degrees. Now, when you get hot outside, your body's got a lot of compensatory mechanisms that it can do. It sweats, and then the sweat evaporates, and it cools your skin down. If your body temperature is higher than the outside temperature, convection allows the heat to go from your body to the outside area. So if you're 98 degrees and the outside area is 85, the temperature will go out through convection, dissipation of heat. The problem is when you're in a closed area and it's 150 degrees and it's humid inside of a car, you have very little compensatory mechanisms. Mm-hmm. So what happens is you may start to sweat, but nothing evaporates, and the humidity is very high inside the car, and then all of a sudden there's nothing that can happen other than your body temperature going up.
Is there a typical time frame that how long you'd have once that starts?
Oh, it starts. The process starts within minutes, but you got to stop and think that you go from 98 to 100, in a few minutes, and you go to 103, and then when you get up in the 105 to 107 degree range, you're in a position we call heat stroke, which is a medical emergency.
Would you notice it?
Oh yeah, you're aware of. I mean, you would be very uncomfortable. You've sat in a sauna before. The sauna does the same type thing, but you're able to get up and get out of it and cool down. The problem is that when you get to a certain temperature, proteins in your body start to denature, meaning they break down, kind of like when you fry an egg. The egg starts out with the yolk. The yolk is actually denatured when it turns white, and it's an irreversible process. So it's a medical emergency to jump on that and try to cool the person down.
Okay, and at what point is it for these kids? I know you're not you didn't perform the autopsies. Is that accurate?
No, that was a Bossier case.
The cause of death would be heat.
Would be heat stroke.
Stroke. And is the time frame different for children because they're so small?
Well, yes. The people that are at risk for heat stroke are the very young and the very old. The very young because they're not able to adapt very well. Elderly people can't adapt well, and often they're on medications that will interfere with their thermoregulatory mechanism. So the very young and the very old are at the highest risk. Older people, we normally see the problem in unventilated homes. Elderly people that live without air conditioning, little fan, unventilated homes, they will lose their compensatory mechanisms and their temperature will rise very quickly and they'll have a heat stroke. Kids, on the other hand, have a large body surface area and they can't thermoregulate well, so kids are at much higher risk.
I'm hearing things about exercise prohibitions now that it's not being a good idea in some of these really, really hot days.
Well, Dan, I mean, we're always going to recommend that if you do exercise at this time of year, you do it early in the morning or late at night. But those are two different things. Those are what we call exertional heat stroke versus the classic heat stroke. Classic heat stroke is the one where you're just sitting in your house and it happens. But if we do see exertional heat strokes, that happens in people who run in midday or play tennis out on a hot tennis court or the situations like that. If they're not adequately hydrated, they don't keep their temperature, their hydration up, their fluid status up, they become at a higher risk. So all of a sudden they'll be just playing tennis and then they'll just drop to the ground. And at that point in time, that's when their temperature went way up. That's why we call it a heat stroke. It's not really a stroke, but it usually is some type of change in mental status like you see with a stroke. They become confused, disoriented, have seizures, etc. And that's the exertional type of heat stroke. So there's a couple different kinds, but they're
Right.
both just as serious.
Dr. Todd Thoma, Caddo Parish Coroner. Let me ask you this, and maybe you don't want to give this advice or not, but how long is if I'm going to run in Circle K and grab a Slurpee and I want to leave the kids in the back seat? I know a lot of folks say you shouldn't even do it for the 5 minutes. What's your advice?
Never. Just this time of year is just never. I mean, people think that it'll be just okay if we're doing it just for a few minutes. But like I told you, the studies have shown that temperatures can go from 70 degrees inside of a car to 120 degrees within 5 to 10 minutes. And then once again, this time of year when the temperature's in the 90s, you can get up to 150 or 160 in cars. So people don't understand the time frame is very, very short. The reason for that is that radiant heat gets into the car and it can't escape. So the car just becomes a greenhouse. Everything catches in there and the temperature goes up very, very rapidly. So this time of year, just don't leave kids or pets in cars even for a brief period of time.
Okay, and this is a gruesome question, and I know, and I hate this. Was the death of these children, was that painful?
Aaron, I don't want to answer that question.
Okay,
The
and
family,
I appreciate that.
The grief that goes on with the families in situations like this is just tremendous. It's a tragic situation, but it's not a good death. I mean, it's one of those deals where you would know something's happening to you and you'd want to try to get out, and obviously couldn't. So it's bad.
I'm sorry for even asking that. I know people have asked me and said I said, well, I'll ask him and see what he says. And
yeah, I mean, hopefully in a situation like that you lose consciousness relatively quickly, and then the rest of it is painless.
Okay.
But you can't guess in a situation like that. I mean, families just have to try to deal with that tragedy, and I just can't imagine what the family would have to go through.
Yeah. Dr. Todd Thoma, I can't thank you enough for being so candid with us this morning. We appreciate your time, and best of luck for the rest of the summer.
Anytime. Thanks, Aaron, Dan. You bet.